Hello world! Today it is Friday the 24th of June 2022 and today it is the 12th day of protests in Ecuador. This is an update video which I make in addition to the first video I made last week about the 10 demands that caused the protests in Ecuador. If you don't know the reasons, the why of these protests, you may watch that other video when you finish this one. I'll leave the link in the description. In that video I said that it was very uncertain what might happen, that we didn't know, there was no way for that. Currently it is still uncertain. Actually, things have escalated, and in this video I will give you an update of the situation. Before starting with the video, please note that this is a summary of news and facts. You are free to leave your comment, please feel free to do so, but if you are going to make a harmful comment, insult me in a way, I recommend you, and I actually ask you to watch the video completely, because we might be in agreement with the situation, but you might be insulting me because you didn't see that part. Just saying, I am not standing on anyone's side, but at the same time I understand both positions, and that is why I try to make an analysis as centered as possible. About travel advisory to Ecuador, unfortunately at this moment what many governments say, and actually I would endorse that recommendation, is that you reconsider your travel. If you're coming during the next week, let's say the last week of June, this might end tomorrow, this might end on Sunday, this might end next week, or this might last a little bit longer. I don't really think it will go past June, but it is a possibility. So if you're coming now in June, you should reconsider your travel, as most governments say, under travel advisory. Unless you're flying to Galapagos, because in that case you won't have any issues, you won't have to leave the airport. If you have to go through Guayaquil and you have to stay one night there, no problem. If you have to stay one night in Quito airport or near Quito airport, there are options near the Quito airport. So if you don't have to go to the city of Quito, there won't be any issue. In the Guayaquil city, the protests are not as complicated as in Quito, because the indigenous peoples are mainly in the Andean region, and now they are gathering in the capital city where the presidential palace is. So no problem in that aspect. Besides that, it is not that you reconsider travel because your life might be endangered, but because it will be very inconvenient to travel between cities. If you're going to move between Guayaquil and Cuenca by land, it won't be possible at the moment. If you're going to travel from Quito to Baños, it won't be possible at the moment by land. There are roadblocks everywhere, all around the country, but especially in the Andes. In the coast, in many areas, there are roadblocks, but not as strong as in the Andes. In cities like Cuenca, the issue is scarcity. We are having at this moment scarcity of gasoline, scarcity of gas, and scarcity of some foodstuff. We don't have chicken at the markets, at the supermarkets, meat. You could find little, but it will be more expensive. There is scarcity of many things, so you will have a complicated time if you come here. Remember, this video is being recorded on the 24th of June 2022. This might change for tomorrow, 25th. So if you would like updates, I would recommend you to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell for receiving updates. Of course, I will make a new video as soon as the situation changes. Also, you can follow me on Instagram, where I post stories to show in real time what's happened. About the protests, let us remember why they are being held. There are 10 demands presented by the CONAIE, the Confederations of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador. They demand that the government complies with these 10 demands so that the strike stops. The 10 demands are: the reduction and no more rise in the price of fuel, 1 year moratorium in the financial system for families to pay their debts, fair prices on farm products, 4. Employment and labor rights, 5. No mining in indigenous territories or water sources, 6. Respect for the 21 collective rights. These are indigenous rights. 7. No privatization of strategic sectors like electricity, water. 8. Control policies and price speculation. 9. Urgent budget for health and education. And 10. Generation of public safety and protection policies. I have made quite a long analysis on these demands, and so if you haven't watched this video, when you finish this video you could watch that other one. Remember, these 10 demands were presented by the CONAIE. And one thing is the CONAIE, the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, and something different is the indigenous peoples. However, yes, there are many people, not only indigenous peoples, also farmers, workers from all sectors that are supporting the protests. But we have to be clear at CONAIE, as the organization leading the protest. For understanding why there are people protesting on the streets, why there are people so angry, we have to understand two things. Number one, the main reason for people to be on the streets is inflation. When they go to the market, to the supermarket, and they buy stuff, it is much more expensive than ever. We have been like during 10 years with the same prices, and now suddenly things are skyrocketing and people don't know how to cover these expenses because everything is much more expensive. There is high unemployment in Ecuador and many people demand on daily wages, and not every day they can work. And since they keep being paid the same thing, situation gets even more complicated. Also, farmers, they get paid very low, the same thing like since 10 years ago for their produce, but now fertilizers are much more expensive, and when they buy other things like for their houses, their meals, everything is much more expensive. Number two, indigenous peoples are very united. This is something I admire, this is something that we might learn from indigenous communities actually, and that I expect to show you in the future with more detail. In the communities there are leaders, and people follow the orders of these leaders. It is a well-organized structure. They have a very strong sense of community. And now CONAIE is like the biggest organization of indigenous communities in all of the country. Then there are minor indigenous communities that follow what CONAIE says, because in 1990 there was a huge strike as well from indigenous people. That's another history I might explain you in another video. But the thing is that indigenous communities are very united. So when they have protests, indigenous communities leave entirely to join the protests. And if they have to go to Quito, many people will go to Quito to join the protest, as it is actually happening right now. But remember, the main complaint, look at this. Here I found something that defines well the feeling of most people who are protesting and people who are blocking the roads. Here it says, what is happening in Ecuador? Many people are angry because government is increasing the price of many things. Tommy, 9 years old, Assembly of Boys and Girls, Project The Future That We Dream, June 2022. Now, regarding the situation, there are two things. The inflation is a worldwide crisis. This is something happening in many countries. United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Ireland, Iran, Portugal, and many other places. Even in the region, Ecuador has one of the lowest inflations so far. But also, we rely on what happens in the United States, because we have as the official currency of Ecuador the United States dollars. So whatever the Federal Reserve decides, that will affect us. Now, the inflation in the United States is very high, and that is affecting us. But most people protest without knowing this. Yes, the government has to do something about it, and the demands are fair, are legit. The thing is that the government is not the only one to blame, and yeah, in a way they have been inactive toward this, or they have looked inactive, they haven't taken sufficient action, or that's what it seems to people, to most people. Usually people don't know about global economy, macroeconomics, how things work, and what they know is what they suffer when they go to the market and they can't buy the same stuff and they keep earning the same. And now for producing, for farmers, many of them indigenous people, they have to buy fertilizers at a much higher price due to the situation in Ukraine, but the intermediaries that buy their products want to buy for the same price. So it is a big crisis, especially in the country areas where most indigenous people are from. People who sell produce from the countryside earn very low for their really hard work. And that is something that sometimes in the cities is not known or not understood. About the organization of indigenous communities, the thing is that if someone doesn't want to join the protests because they want to work or they are not in agreement with what the leaders say, they simply get fined or they get their services blocked, like water, electricity. So they have to join the protests. Or even if they want to sell their produce, now protesters throw that production away, like in this video.
Para todas aquellas personas que lastiman sin pensar en los demás, un mensaje. Hagan todo el daño que quieran.
It is a very complicated situation. But to be fair, I have to admit that most people joining the protest do it voluntarily. They go to the marches, they go to Quito, or they go to block the roads because they actually want to join the protest. And they think that if Lasso leaves presidency of the Republic of Ecuador, prices will start falling. They are convinced that they are on the streets fighting for the common good, fighting for all of us. And this is reinforced by the leaders as well, who blame Lasso of all the prices going up and up and up. With this situation, you can understand the anger. And with this anger, violence has escalated in the protest. Hardly ever you will see violence against workers or people like working. Violence is mainly against the armed force and the police. And this has caused actually dead people and many injured people. Here in Cuenca, where I am, the situation is tense calm. Here you don't have big clashes with the police because you don't have the president here. The president is in Quito and the power is in Quito. But in Quito there have been some very strong clashes. It is true that some opportunists are starting to infiltrate among the protests or making their own barricades for example, start charging tolls to drivers that want to go through the barricades. Among protesters, 6 people have been reported to be killed by the police or have been reported to have deceased to the hands of the police. This is now under investigation, but clashes have been so hard in some areas of the country. When you have this level of violence, this is to be expected. And again, I want to make this very clear. This is not about good people versus bad people. This is about people versus people. The people on the streets are demanding justice, fair prices, and that they can go to the markets and buy what they need and they are able to cover their expenses, rental, food, gasoline, everything. And on the other hand, you have people, the police or the armed force, who are defending the rule of law and that are defending the democracy in Ecuador because the current president has been elected fairly. So they are trying to protect the constitutional order. Violence usually brings more violence, and this could keep escalating. And because of what the president said today, Friday, it is very likely to happen because they said that the use of force would keep increasing as the protesters have shown that they only want to overthrow the president. Is there a risk of civil war? No, not really, because the guns are being held by the police and by the armed force. The protesters on the streets, they don't have guns. Some of them may have them, some of them have actually been seized with them, but it's just a minimum part. Most people have rocks, stones, and spears, which yes, can be mortal, but even though these are not guns, so no risk of civil war here. Something that can make you feel safe about the future in Ecuador is that this has happened before. This has happened in several occasions, and every time the protests have ended. Usually with the indigenous people winning or partially winning, but their demands being heard. I think this time it will be the same. This time the protests are not being as supported as in 2019 because many people learned that time that strikes like this with roadblocks are not the best solution. That actually affects us even more. But still many people are very angry at what the government is doing. So far there is a lot of loss. People cannot produce, people have to throw away their production, like milk. People who are exporters cannot get their produce to the airports or to the ports. And for example, in my area in tourism, $2 to $5 million a day are being lost, which for Ecuador is a lot. Many people have canceled their bookings, have decided to cancel their flights as well. And with that, many people are losing. People who work at restaurants, at hotels, at tourist areas, the drivers. And also in Cuenca, for example, we have a scarcity of gas, so many restaurants have closed. For you to understand, gas is the main source of heat for cooking here in Ecuador. This Friday afternoon, there was a televised address of the president indicating that he had spoken with some representatives of Leonidas Issa, the leader of CONAIE, and that they had reached an agreement or a partial agreement. But due to the violence that escalated on Thursday and other information and other messages they had received, the intention was clearly, and I am quoting the President Lasso here is that the intention is not to go to dialogue, but actually to overthrow the president. I think that when he meant that there were some statements, he meant some videos that have been viralized on social media of some indigenous leaders and protesters yelling and indicating that they want Lasso out of the presidency, which is what actually many people want, but it's not something that CONAIE has actually declared publicly or that Leonidas Issa himself has declared in public. But it is true that many people in the protest, maybe most people in the protests, simply want Lasso to resign. It's a very complicated situation, but there has been a lot of manipulation, like what Leonidas said a couple of weeks ago before the protest started, in which he indicated the price of gasoline in Europe, and he indicated it was cheaper than in Ecuador, that it was an incredible thing because in Ecuador we produce, in Europe they don't, and he said that Lasso had to do something about it. But the thing is that he didn't say that price in Europe is in liters, not in gallons as in Ecuador. 1 gallon here is 3.75 liters.
De ellas ninguna ha cumplido. Primero, el incremento del precio de los combustibles. Se dijo que quieren llevarlo a nivel internacional. Vengo en este momento de Europa. ¿A cómo está el galón de gasolina? Buena gasolina a nivel de Europa. $2.50 la gasolina extra. ¿A cómo está aquí la gasolina super? Perdón, la gasolina super, en este caso en Europa, $2.50. ¿Cómo está aquí? $4.68. ¿Sobre qué se sostienen para incrementar los precios? ¿Cómo es posible? Países que no tienen petróleo tienen a este nivel el precio. Países como el nuestro, productores de petróleo, resulta que estamos duplicando, en este caso, el precio en relación a nivel internacional. No puede ser eso justo. Por eso tiene que garantizar, en este caso, un manejo integral en este rubro del...
So far, he hasn't made any new statement correcting this, and I wonder how many people are in the protests believing that this is still true.
It's Friday, 24th of June, from the city of Cuenca, and I am heading to a gasoline station.
What I want you mainly to see is the prices of gasoline, how they are subsidized, how they are frozen. Diesel, $1.90 per gallon, and the most expensive gasoline, $4.80. Okay, but what has the government done so far about the 10 demands of CONAIE? Have they done something, or have they simply fooled around? Some measures have been taken by the government, such as 50% of subsidy to urea, one of the main fertilizers, forgiveness of loans up to $3,000 in one of the banks of the government, more funding for intercultural education, and other things. Yes, what the government has done is still too little. However, the government has at least given some baby steps toward the right direction of the dialogue. Actually, the government sent a reply, an official letter on Monday, to the 10 demands of CONAIE. In this letter, they explained some measures they are taking now after protests started, and they were also indicating some data about why some of the demands were not accurate, because they were blaming the government for some stuff, but they indicated in that letter many things. So far, the CONAIE, the indigenous leaders, haven't replied to that letter with data or with a viability plan of how the 10 demands can actually be complied with, all of them. They now say that the 10 demands have to be complied with, period, or that they will not take responsibility for what will happen. You may see.
No vamos a perder el norte. Me han detenido, me han intentado asesinarla. Mientras tanto hemos estado con vida, hemos dicho, aquí son los 10 puntos y punto, compañeras. Y si por este peso se cae, no es nuestro problema, compañeras y compañeros.
Situation is escalating and in some points turning into a class conflict, which is very sad. On one hand, there are people saying that these protests are the poor people demanding justice to the rich people who only know to make a living of them by exploiting. And on the other hand, we have people who say that these are lazy people, that these are ignorant indigenous people who want everything for free. Both sides are wrong. These are not the only two sides, of course, but these two sides are wrong, both of them. And those are the people who usually act with violence. It is hard to see that in 2022 we still have these discussions when we could work on other things, but well, we're still missing a lot of empathy. We haven't yet learned about putting ourselves in the place of others. because we see everything from our perspective and many times can't even try to see from the other side, from the other's place for one moment. Okay, that would be the end of this update of June 24th. I hope it may have been useful to you, or that it may have shed some light on the doubts you had about the situation. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them on the comment section. Also, I invite you to follow me on Instagram, BuildDevTours, for seeing stories about the situation in real time and also for seeing content about Ecuador, tourism and culture, which is what I will normally do once this situation ends. And remember that if you have more specific questions about trips, tours or immigration in Ecuador, you may send me an email to info@builddevtours.com, info@builddevtours.com. Thank you very much for watching the video to this point, I really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please remember to do so. Thank you. See you next time. Goodbye.